Okay, I think I'm getting the hang of these hooks. So, your kid gets into Stanford University for soccer. You throw a party, invite everybody, and before the first semester is even done, he says, you know, Mom, Dad, I actually don't want to go to school. I want to go pro. Whew. If you've done the drive, spent the money, lost the sleep, organized the entire family life around youth soccer, this moment is just the one we were scared of and we're dreaming of. This episode is not really about the highlights, it's what comes after the decisions, the pressure, the instability, the injuries, and the routine, and what it really takes to survive once soccer becomes your job.
Today, we're joined by Alex Rando, and here's what matters about his path. He's a New York City kid who climbed the ladder the way a lot of families here and elsewhere think about and dream about. He starts grassroots, then he moves over to Manhattan Soccer Club. The next leap to PDA is a big one and one of the most important elite MLS NEXT academies in the tri-state area. From there, it's the academy pathways, Red Bull, and then NYCFC's academy. And then it's time for college, a commitment to Stanford. And before even playing at Stanford, because of a whole bunch of different circumstances, which we'll get into, Alex transfers to the University of Virginia, one of the top, if not the top, college soccer program in the country. But even with that, the dream of being a pro couldn't be contained within him. So he goes back to the grind and he leaves school to join a USL championship team and then MLS NEXT Pro, eventually working his way to NYCFC's first team environment.
I mean, on one hand, as a parent, we want our kids to have the easier of choices. And I'm going, come on, man, are you kidding me? I'd probably be furious. But on the other hand, Alex is easy to root for. He's done the hard work, stayed humble. Can't help but love this guy. Alex, welcome to Chasing the Game. In a nutshell, where does this story start? You know, where does soccer become a plan?
You know, every kid's got a dream, right? So, I mean, mine started when I was 4, just playing soccer. I think it was like ASO League or something like that, West Side Soccer League. I grew up in Manhattan, Upper West Side. It was just my local league. Really, really liked the sport. When I was 7, I got thrown in goal. I think I conceded like 11 goals or something like that. But I ended up like coming out and just like taking out forwards, like fully penalties and everything. But I really liked the aggressive, the aggressiveness of the position. And I don't remember who it was, but someone was like, went to one of my parents and was like, hey, like you should get some real training. And so you can make the argument that like around 7, that's when I really, really wanted to do it. I mean, I always had the dream to play pro. I'm kind of jumping ship a little bit here, but the decision I made when I left University of Virginia, which is where I went to school, to then play pro, that's kind of when I realized it could be a reality. So probably when I was around 18, 19 was when I realized it could really be a reality. But yeah, going back to my story, like I met a guy named Memo Valencia, who's the Portland Timbers goalkeeper coach now. I started out with a team called Super Soccer Stars. So I went from ASO to Super Soccer Stars, which I don't even know if that exists anymore, to be honest with you. And then went to Manhattan Soccer Club, which is kind of like one of the big 3, non-academies in New York City. And then from there, we would win State Cup, we win everything. But then when we go to regionals, we would get beat by PDA, which is Jersey Player Development Academy.
How old were you at that point?
At this point, I had just started middle school. So I was 11 to 13. Yeah.
And at this point, your parents are driving you to Jersey. You're like, hey, parents,
they
by
made
the way,
commitment. Yeah,
we're driving to Jersey. And you were the one who was the driving force here?
I always wanted to play. And I told them, like, I want to go here. I want to play. And I think what happened was that they had people and parents talking to them and were like, hey, this kid's got a little talent. You should push this. And so they bit the bullet. They drove me. I mean, I went to a middle school called Delta Middle School on the Upper West Side. I used to walk out at 2:20, and then we had so our building was here. We had a garage that was adjacent, and then my house was about 2 blocks down. And so I would either go right to the garage or I go to my house, and then I go straight to the garage. But I was leaving at 3 on the dot because that's when rush hour started. and we had to get down to the Lincoln Tunnel or the George Washington Bridge. This was like freeways too. So this is like, you got to kind of gamble a little bit. Like Google Maps has got terrible GPS, traffic, everything. So we ended up figuring something out with one of the people at PDA, and they got access to a church that was near the fields. And basically, no one was using the church except there was like some, I guess, a pastor or some like church people that were there. And they were like, you can come and take your classes and use our like kitchenette that we have. So I would like, or my mom, it wasn't be me, but my mom would like pack me like a pre-match meal or pre-training meal, and then we would heat it up in the microwave. I would do all my homework. I would train probably starting at 6:37, finish at 9. We get back in the car. At that point, like the drive with traffic is about an hour and a half, closer to 2 hours. And then without traffic, you can do it in about an hour 15. So then we were straight back in the car. And it was like that 4 times a week. And then while that was all going on, I had an opportunity to go to Red Bulls with their pre-academy system, not even their academy. And this was U13 year. PDA, like, we're like, hey, we're going to give you a lot of playing time this following year. And PDA is very much of a family. And so I was like, I'm going to stay 1 more year. And the subsequent year, when I actually did turn 13, so my U14 year, I went to Red Bulls. So I spent 1 season with Red Bulls in their academy. That was actually really, really good. Got a lot of playing time, ended up playing up a few years here and there. And then 2015, NYCFC was formed and their academy was formed. And, our main reason we went to NYCFC was the commute.
Yeah,
which
tell me about it.
It ended up being really funny because, when I was going to Whippany in PDA, that's an hour and 30, but the distance is like 40 miles, right? So it ended up being an hour and 30, but the distance was 6 miles to NYCFC because you didn't want to get on the Triborough or the Grand Central during rush hour. It was a disaster. And then God forbid you took the E to the F to the Q46 and then you did that whole thing. You're looking at like 2 hours. But yeah, long story short, ended up at NYCFC, was there for 4.5 years. And I would say towards the end of my last year, that's really when I was like, I can do this. Like I can play. And I always, I never questioned that I could. It was more that I just didn't realize it could be a reality, if that made sense. So, yeah.
We had one of our questions here was, can you talk a little bit about the New York City youth soccer culture? I think you just summed it up, which is like, the cards are so stacked against us in so many ways from a logistics perspective, and the decisions that are made often have to do with what is possible and what isn't. But it sounds like you made your family sacrifice so much to give you the opportunity to live out your dream. And when you think back on it now, what was the most taxing, or how taxing was it on not just you, but on your family as you were both transitioning clubs, but also the commitment and the dedication that went into it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, without my parents, I wouldn't be playing pro. Just without a doubt. More so than, my mom had so my mom is a psychologist, still is. She had a private practice, still does have her private practice, but she had to basically restructure her entire schedule when she was taking me to training. And then my dad would restructure his, but he was doing a lot of theater work. My dad's a theater director. He ended up going overseas and working for months on end, really since I was 6. So, there's times where it was mostly just my mom. And then when he would come back, then my mom would go on the back burner, and then it would just be my dad taking me to training and doing everything. But this is really funny. I remember talking to my dad because they had just gotten the car, because that was the year I decided to go to PDA. And basically their agreement was that hey, we got this car. We actually they had a car before me, but this was the first car they had since I'd been alive. And they were like, we want you to drive when you turn 16. Once you turn 16, we're not taking you to training anymore. That's the idea. And I think I was maybe 11 at the time or 10 at the time. But then once I turned 16, I got my license, and that was that. So they stopped. I I was driving on my permit at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure. Desperate times to call for desperate measures.
I was on my junior's license when I wasn't allowed. Like they give you an hour, like there are certain hours that you can drive from, and I was just fully past those. But yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the transitions from club to club, and how difficult were they on you? It sounds like you followed the right path to get to where you are today, but how difficult was that, and what often drove those decisions for you?
The only one that maybe was a little heartfelt was going from Red Bulls to NYCFC, because they were like this new MLS team. Like Red Bulls had actually, at the time, I got an opportunity to play with their under 16 team, and I was 13, and they were like, we want you to be with the under 16 team full time. I ended up going with the under 16 team to Salzburg. Like we played Werder Bremen, we played Mönchengladbach, played Benfica. Like it was really, really cool. And they believed a lot in me as well. And then NYCFC was just like, honestly, on paper, it didn't really seem that much more attractive. Like we get Red Bull has a whole facility, you know, they got everything going on. They got Red Bull Arena. NYCFC didn't even have St. John's at this point. Like this was NYCFC training at College Point in Queens. Like that's like there's guys drinking beer and playing pickup next to us, and like, you know, it's but
not much has changed.
Good point. But like, you know, I think what ended up happening is that NYCFC felt like a club that was really for the city. I remember when like they walked me through the whole first team facility, just to kind of show off. I think they still do this kind of thing, but like just to show off like what their whole idea is. You know, Claudio Reyna was the sporting director at the time, and you know, he was like, we've got big plans for this club. There's a couple guys I knew from like U.S. youth national team stuff that were there. There's guys I played against from the city that I knew were going there, like Justin Hack, like him and I. We weren't like we were friendly, but like we were playing against each other since we were 10 or 11. Like he was always on Med Oval, and I was either on MSC or PDA or then Red Bulls. So like we would always play against him. I remember like I went to they had a little trial thing. I went there, and I could see that like, all right, this is actually gonna be a really good team. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I think there was no step down. I think everything was a step up. I think just every situation was a little bit different. And then on top of that, you got a brand new MLS team that are putting a lot of investment in and really in New York City. So that was kind of the reason why. And then I ended up going for one semester to Stanford. I got into like a massive fight with the head coach at the time, and that was really when I realized I wanted to play professionally, actually. So, and so while this was all going on, I was still in high school because New York City public schools don't end until end of June, and this was June 1st. So I had an entire month of high school I still had to deal with. So I had all that work, the finals coming up, all that kind of stuff. On top of that, I had NYCFC's second national championship run. So I was a part of the first one. I've played a lot of games like in the league stuff, but like I got injured, and you know, this guy Johan Penaranda plays at Tulsa now. Like he beat me out. He was flying, doing really, really well. But I was a part of that group, right? So we had already won one national championship, and I'm like, now like I've played almost every game with this national championship. The U19 team was U18, now it's U19. We got a really good team. We're going to be like the only team besides I think Atlanta United and maybe FC Dallas to go back to back. And I was like, I want to be a part of that. Like I want to play. And so I basically went. I couldn't get the head coach's permission. He denied everything. So I was like, okay, you know, with all due respect,
this is the guy who recruited you.
Correct. This is the guy that recruited me.
Right.
And so I was like, there was no soccer training at all. It was just running. And like, to be honest with you, like the runs they would have you do were absurd. I was losing, like NYCFC put me on a plan my last year to gain weight. And I had gained probably about like 6 or 7 pounds of muscle. I was feeling good. That entire thing was just gone out the window as soon as I stepped into Stanford. Because they just having you run like 2 miles under 12, having been I'm a goalkeeper, I don't run. Like this is like, I've never heard of this. But I did run, and I tried doing it the best as I could. And while that all happened, I went to my professors, and I was like, hey, you know, this is kind of the situation. Like I got classes with you Tuesday, Thursday. I got to be in New York taking high school classes and training with my New York team. I'm going to come in these office hours. And they were so cool with it. They were like, you can do this. Like, we've had people with even worse schedules. Like, so like, this makes a lot of sense to us. So I ended up doing that behind the head coach's back, just because he didn't give me permission. And NYCFC helped out a lot. They covered some of the flights. They like were basically, they told me what trainings I needed to show up to. And then, we ended up going to Dallas for the first round, and then ended up going to San Diego, and then ended up going to LA for the final. And we ended up winning the whole thing. And it's the funniest situation ever because we win the whole thing, right? And like at all these academy games, like you still see it, like you got all these college coaches like kind of like lining up and to be fair, like NYCFC, the team before that is probably the best academy team that ever existed in the US. Like just statistically it is with the amount of pro players. I think it was 17 professionals, first division professional players out of 22. And like those are numbers that like Ajax puts out, right?
Wow.
Or like Atalanta puts out. Like there's been no better academy team since then. But then that carryover was the following year. There were still like 12 of those guys, 13 of those guys. So you still got all these like college coaches scouting and everything because a lot of us we're all playing up still. And we win 2-1, beat FC Dallas. I fly back. I like all my academy guys, they go out, like they have a fun time, like they're hanging out in LA, have a great night. I like to go straight to the airport and I fly right back to Palo Alto. And like the next morning, Stanford men's soccer has like a meeting and everything. And we talk a little bit. And he's like, we have another national championship in our midst. And like, gives me a shout out, which is very nice. Then everyone leaves and he asks to talk to me. And he's like, we're putting you on academic probation for the like 2019 and 2020 season. And at this point I was like, all right, dude, like, you're just trying to send a message. And I like, he was yelling at me for a while because like I wasn't really biting into the whole situation. I was just guessing him to death. And what ended up happening was I was like, look, like, dude, with all due respect, I'll leave then. And he's like, you're going to walk away from a Stanford degree. And I was like, cool. Like, this soccer is more important to me. I just threw myself in the transfer portal, went to UVA. But UVA couldn't get me until the spring because literally I joined the portal on like August 20th and their fall admission closed on August 19th. Like it was just, I missed it by a day. What ended up happening was really nice was like, I called NYCFC and I was like, hey, this is the situation. Like it was a disaster at Stanford. And they're like, just come back. Like you're still eligible for the academy. So I played the rest of the academy time there from like September, October, November, December. So 4 more months of the academy. I worked as a design intern in New York. And then in January 1st, 2020, I went to UVA. And then I was there at UVA all through 2020 and then halfway through 2021. So technically I did 4 semesters of college.
Well, pretty ordinary story for a young soccer player, right? Nothing extraordinary here. Do you get anybody consulting you at that time when you're in this kind of delicate, giant life decision stage? I mean, are your parents involved? Do you have agents? Do you have people in the middle? Like, how do you make these, what you just described as these kind of enormous decisions? Or is this just who you are, Alex?
I'd say a lot of them are like me driven. But at the same time, it's not like I'm making a decision and without consulting anyone. So I mean, yes, my parents, I would talk to my parents. I talk to my dad a lot. Like,
so you go to your dad after all the driving, all the effort, you know that school I got into, it's not working out for me. And he's like, cool, no problem, son. Follow your dreams.
Yeah, well, to be fair, yeah. And the thing is that I ended up saving the money. Like they've got that 529 still running right now. Like they haven't pulled anything from it, to be honest. Because I had a bit of a scholarship at Stanford and it didn't go into effect, or actually, no, it went into effect. It covered the summer term. So it covered that, but it wouldn't have covered when I was in school, like if I was in the fall term. And at UVA, they were able to give me some money. And then my last semester, they ended up giving me a full ride. UVA is top class in everything. Like, in matter of fact, I loved my UVA experience considerably more than Stanford. And, when I actually ended up leaving, when I ended up like walking away from UVA to then go play with LAFC / Las Vegas Lights, they because it was COVID, I had a conversation with my academic advisor, because I told him, he was the only one I knew that was like I had a professional offer on the table, and because I hadn't told any of the coaches, and the coaches all knew that I wanted to play pro because I was very open about that. Like I had gone pretty much every the end of our first spring season like on Zoom because COVID had just hit. I was saying like, hey, like I want to play. And then like end of 2020, I get a random trial in like Dundalk in Ireland. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to go try this. And they were like, okay, you're our number one. Like we want you to play. And like, no, it's going to be crazy, but we want you still to try this out. So they were very, very supportive. Like, I still want to finish this degree at some point because I made a promise to my mom that I would finish it or just get a college degree.
But I'm trying to kind of figure out how it is that you get to a point where you're an exceptional athlete and you were in the top environments, but you get to a point where it all comes a la carte. Like the best schools are knocking at your door. A professional team wants you to play. I mean, it's just how it comes. I mean, it's being exceptional, of course, but that's what this is all about at the end. It's that easy.
Then just one other question before you answer that. How much did you have to do to get yourself out there?
Yeah.
Or was it really just all inbound?
Yeah.
As far as the college process or pro opportunities? Because we hear a lot about the fact that it's so incredibly competitive, and probably even more so now than when you were going through the process looking at schools, just given the amount of international influx, which seems to get greater and greater every year. How much effort did you have to put into putting yourself out there versus them all coming to you?
For the college process, to be completely honest with you, it was mostly inbound. That being said, I had to maintain a 4.0 in school. Like Stanford didn't really drop the requirements at all. In fact, like it was 3.9. That was the minimum GPA I needed. And over a 32 on the ACT, I ended up getting over that. But I took the ACT, so I don't know whether that translated into SAT. But in terms of actually getting recruited, just to go back to like that 2018 like academy team, like that team was so good that we would be playing Seacoast United, and like that's up in New Hampshire. And we would have college scouts at those games. So like I mean, when we hit about 15, 16, we hit about 16. Really towards the latter half of our 16, so like towards the end of our sophomore year, there were coaches everywhere.
Who are some of the kids on that team?
Give you the whole lineup. Like I mean, like the biggest names would be Gio Reyna, Joe Scally, James Sands, Justin Hack, Dante Polvara, Will Sands. So these are all MLS, Bundesliga.
So you grew up with those kids. You played for multiple years with them.
Yeah.
Were any of their paths completely linear? And when did you guys as a group or as individuals realize how special this group was and that there were a lot of pros coming out of that team?
I think we always knew it. I think like in the back of our mind, but we used to like go into our huddles before games and be like, oh, we fucking suck. Oh, we're so shit. Or like, I just want to go home and play like Fortnite, or I want to go home. Like it was like very nonchalant, and that was kind of the whole approach that we had. Like honestly, and like there's a video clip in 2019 where we won the national championship, where it's like Andres Jason, who now plays in Denmark, played in the MLS for years. Like him and Veljko Pekovic, who was like one of our attacking midfielders and wingers, like we're in the huddle and we're kind of trying to focus and everything. And they just realize there's a Jumbotron. Like they're like, yo, there's a Jumbotron. So they turn around and they're like holding their arms like this and they're trying to find where the camera is. And they spend like 15 seconds trying to find where the camera is. But meanwhile, FC Dallas is all lined up, just like waiting for us. And we're just fucking taking the piss. So, I mean,
as my son would say, that there's a lot of aura farming going on there.
So did you find that at that stage when you already are a mature academy player and you can see the goals in front of you, do you see the college as was a less pressured entry point post academy? Okay, can you talk about that a little bit?
I got in the Stanford, like I had verbally committed. I pretty much got their sign off my sophomore year. So, and like I was done at
sophomore
that
year
point.
of high school.
Yeah, and like halfway through my sophomore year as well. Like it wasn't like towards the end. A lot of guys were like that. I remember some guys waited. Some guys had a lot of offers, and they just waited and took their time. I think maybe to get more money or something. But yeah, no, there was not a lot of pressure on the college side. Um, and like I said, so that was mostly inbound, but outbound has been my professional career. I definitely have to say. And that, like, I go to LA after college. I signed with LAFC on a second team contract, and they're owners of Las Vegas Lights. So I spent my first season living in LA and then commuting to Las Vegas, which was a crazy experience. USL Championship was also crazy experience, being like a 19-year-old in that situation. It was great. I really loved it. I had to really put myself out there, to be honest. Like I knew that this was my shot at playing pro. It was a good situation. I had a lot of games lined up, and I ended up getting a call from my old academy coach at NYCFC, and he was like, I want to bring you in for the second team. But at the time, like, I did not have a good relationship with the first team goalkeeper coach. So the second team goalkeeper coach was like, I want to bring you in though, because I know you can prove to him that you can be something good. So I spent basically 2 years at the second team level just grinding. I tore my adductor completely off the bone. Like, it was like there was months that it were just depressing. And to be honest with you, like, second team league, like the first year, 2022, it was good. It was solid. You had like John Duran playing in that league, right? Because he wasn't playing on Chicago Fire. So, like, I mean, you had some big name players playing in it, and it was more of like an under 23 league, less than it is now. And now it's just a full blown academy thing. But
you're talking about Next Pro as a full blown academy thing.
Yeah, it's full blown academy. It's not professional. And then
can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is crowds. Like, how can you play a professional game with 50 people in the crowd? Like, it's not entertainment. Like, we play a sport for fun, right? But it's entertainment if you think about it. So it's not entertainment at that point. Like, it's just academy. It's kind of like a testing ground for MLS. They try these new rules, like penalty shootouts straight after games. If you don't get off the field in 10 seconds, you have a 2-minute, like, you're off the field for. I'd never heard of these rules in my life. It was absurd.
It sounds great.
Only in America, we're going to try to
exactly.
change the world sport.
I mean, dude, in my last year, like, I played only 10 games in Next Pros last year. Like, it's not professional at all. And it's so funny. Like, I didn't, like, my first year at Vegas, I was like, it can't get worse than this, right? Like, conceding 60 goals in a season, busing 6 hours one way in, like, the blazing heat, like, in the middle of the desert. And then, like, as soon as I went to Next Pro, I was like, oh, I really missed that, actually. Like, I really, like, that's really professional soccer. That this is not professional. Yeah, I spent 2 years at the Next Pro level on a Next Pro contract, and I had to, like, absolutely grind. Like, I think the one thing that New York taught me or coming back to New York, was that, like, work ethic. Like, I always had a lot of natural talent. My work ethic wasn't there all the time. But I think since I've been back, like, I try to be the first one in the facility. I'm trying to be the last one out. I'll watch film before training. I'll lift before training. I'm stretching for almost an hour and a half before training. Like, I'm talking to all the strength and conditioning guys, trying to figure out how I can get faster, how I can get quicker. I think that's what New York taught me. And then that's what taught me, like, okay, this is the standard that you need at the MLS level. This is the minimum. And there's guys that get away with it because they're very, very good. But, like, I'm all right. And I need my work ethic to kind of help my,
But you're saying that this strict work ethic was developed later on in your profession, in your soccer life, not when you were a teenager.
I'd say the soccer aspects of, like, me wanting to go to the park by myself and kick a ball against the wall or practice different things, that never changed. I'm talking about, like, your discipline, your eating habits. Are you watching film? All these kind of things like that, like those little details. How you handle yourself. How do you, like, are you remembering, like, even things like, are you remembering the conversation that you had with so-and-so player a couple weeks ago about, like, what's going on with his family? Like, maybe he's struggling with something, and so then, in training, like, you don't have to scream at him, or, like, you can dial it back a little bit. So there's a lot of really nuanced things that I don't think I would have noticed.
It's maturity, and it's ultimately it's being a pro. right?
Exactly. Yeah. No,
And,
that's the easiest way to put it.
But as parents, it's very easy to sit here and say, of course, you got to be disciplined with your diet and your lifestyle, and you have a lot of opportunities coming. Matt and I just spoke earlier exactly about your story, and I was saying that if only my son understood the position he's in life in his young age, and he did this and this and this, his life would be much easier later on, let's say his college process or whatever. That's why I was asking you these questions.
The one thing that that really helps me now as an adult and get my work ethic right and get me regimented is this idea of routines. And that having a good routine can change any outcome for the better. I mean, for the worse as well, but mostly for the better. I had a guy named Jake Roswell who's still at New York City FC, but he's like the strength and conditioning guy. And he was like, I just told him one day in like 2022, like, hey, I'm going to show up to the gym really early, and I'm going to show up to the gym after, and I'm going to just work my ass off essentially. And he was like, I'm going to put together a program, and this is going to make you better. This is going to make you quicker. And that sort of got my love for the gym. And the gym really helped me. That was sort of the start. Like that helped me put in place, okay, when am I going to go to sleep? Okay, what am I going to eat here? Okay, what am I going to watch tape? Okay, the gym was kind of that thing that got my routine down. And that really made me realize how I can get better as an athlete, but also how I can get better as a human as well. When I was locked in on the gym, it helped me sort of get my mind right. It sounds super cliche, but that's really the one advice I would give to you is the gym is what pushed me in that direction to figuring out routines. And I'm not saying you should go and tell your kids go start lifting dumbbells or anything.
No, but I think the takeaway for you, it's the gym. But I think the takeaway is that each kid has to find that thing for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Which gets them to a place where their passion aligns to reality, right? That's hard. That's hard for kids to figure out. It's hard for adults to figure out, let alone for kids. But we put so much pressure, and these kids, in some cases, put so much pressure on themselves to figure it all out by the time they're 13 or 14 years old. There's only one Lamine Yamal in the world, right? We don't see a whole lot of 17-year-olds destroying La Liga. So why do we think that the next one is right around the corner all the time?
No, I think you're totally right. It's all just what can kind of put that in place for them. And honestly, when I was younger, I was not a social person at all. I went to 2 parties my entire time in high school, and I almost never went out. I had girlfriends and everything like that, but I never was really a social person. My bread and butter was soccer and video games.
Were there periods of time where you almost quit, where you lost the fire, the passion? And if so, do you remember those? Do you specifically remember those times and what caused it and how you got out of it?
I've never wanted to quit. I've never wanted to flat out be like, this is it. And in fact, that realization came when I ended up walking away from Stanford. I was I saw how depressed I was, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to play soccer for an entire year. I was like, this is more important than school. That's what occurred to me. And then in 2023, when I tore my adductor, I was playing really well. I was doing really well, and I just was honestly overworking myself. And I just hit a goal kick, and it popped off the bone. And that was probably the most emotional I'd ever been, because I was still on a second team contract. I was pushing every day with the first team because I was with the first team full time, and then just playing games with the second team. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. I'm not going to get this contract. And so that was one moment where I was I never thought I would quit. But what I always thought to myself is and I still do this when I was younger, is what would I say to my 6-year-old self? Or what would he say to me if he saw me trying to walk away from the game right now? He would be sad. He would be upset. So I could never do that. I could never stop playing. I mean, at some point I will, right? But that was always what I thought, that there was a younger version of me somewhere behind me being no, you got to keep playing. So
let me ask you, I was curious about, UVA is arguably the best college soccer program in the history of this country. But Harvard has an amazing soccer program, and obviously it's Harvard. What are you getting in a pro environment, even if it's a USL environment, that's different than you're
No,
getting in the college environment.
It's like you got bills. That's really the difference. Bills, then you got a crowd. Like people got to pay bills. People got to put food on the table. It becomes way more of a reality. There was a quote that it might have been like Patrick Vieira or something like that, but it was basically that like you learn everything in soccer by the time you're like 16 or like 15. And the only difference between like a 16-year-old and like a 24-year-old professional in the Premier League is like he can do everything significantly faster and significantly more consistent. That's like the biggest difference. So I would say that sort of translates to college, to USL to MLS. Like I would say that, I haven't played in any other leagues, but I would say like MLS to, the Prem, MLS to, La Liga. Like as a goalkeeper, I can hit like a 70-yard side volley, right? And like I can put it right on a guy's foot. But maybe I can do that like 1 out of 20 times, right? And even as like a pro, maybe I can do that 1 out of 20 times. But then you go and you watch like Allison, like he can do it 15 out of 20 times, or he can do it 12 out of 20 times. So like that's the only difference.
But this is a great point that Matt brought up, because you're at NYCFC, Matt Freeze. I know you guys have camaraderie between you, obviously as teammates and on a personal level. But you're talking about a rising star goalie, national team, and you're a goalie. There's only one can play a game. There's no subs. You're not going to be a defender. They can't put you on the wing. No formation is going to change the fact that you cannot play on that team. So where does that put you mentally as a young player after this enormous journey that you've taken?
I mean, I would say I'd be lying if I say that it didn't suck, right? Like it definitely sucks, and it took a toll. But at the same time, you realize you're in a really good goalkeeping situation. You're probably in the best goalkeeping core in the league at the time, especially last year and the year before that. Like I mean, like you want to play, and I want to play every game, but at the same time, that's not realistic. With the guys that I had in front of me, and I knew that. And I mean, the coaches said that. I was well aware of that. But once you come to that realization that you're not going to play, you just got to deal with it. That's life. I can't show up and train like shit just because I'm not playing. Like that makes no sense. I got to show up and train and keep doing my job. It's my job at the end of the day, right? We're getting paid to play something that people watch, and that's entertainment. And yes, you want to push and you want to become the eventual one, but at the same time, it's not linear, especially not linear for a goalkeeper. Yeah. So at the same time, you learn so much, even as like a third or a fourth. Like it's not a bad situation. Yes, it's a bad situation where I'm not playing, right? And that sucks, and I hated that. But at the same time, I'm knowing like I got like USA's #1 in front of me. I got El Salvador national team goalkeeper in front of me, and also a guy I grew up playing with, like Tomas Romero, I grew up playing with since I was like 12, and then Greg Ranjitson, Rob Vartuzin, who is our goalkeeper coach. Like he's like, one of the biggest American soccer goalkeeper coaches of all time. Like you learn so much from that situation. So I mean, it sucked, yes, but at the same time, it was great. I really enjoyed it, and I learned a ton. So,
can you talk a little bit, Alex, about what exactly is so you signed a homegrown contract? How does that work for young players? And when we've got 15-year-olds or 16-year-olds and their families who listen to this, and they're starting to get presented with homegrowns, is there any advice in the process?
I would say they need to go to college first. Just try it. That's the biggest advice I would give. Because a lot of these schools do situations, especially post-COVID, where if you just get accepted and you do a semester and you pass, you can return to the school at a later point. You won't be able to play soccer there, don't get me wrong, but you can always keep that door open. I think there's this idea that you should rush into it if they present you with a contract. And I think, no, you got to take a step back and kind of look at everything and look at the bigger picture. It's like, there's not many professional MLS players out there, but at the same time, there's even fewer professional MLS players that are playing in the MLS, right? So, do you want to become a player, and are you faced with the fact that, you're not going to play? You're not going to play for a while. Or maybe there is a situation, because, every situation is different, but maybe there is a situation where someone gets hurt, someone gets into a fight with the sporting director, someone gets gets sick and is out for a while. And so now like, people start dropping. And so then you move your way up. But, for like 17, 16-year-olds that are being presented with, and some of these guys aren't even being presented with upfront homegrown deals, are being presented now with like 2 years second team, 2 years first team deals. I would say no off the bat. I would say no right away. I would definitely, maybe if it's a full homegrown deal, I would consider it a little more, but I would not go into the next pro situation unless unless you have a school in that you still want to go to.
You were talking about a good relationship you had with the second team coach, for example, versus a not good relationship you had with the first team coach. Can you explain a little bit to our listeners what that means?
I mean, like I just had one person that believed in me and one person that needed to be persuaded that he could believe in me. That was basically the whole picture, the second team goalkeeper coach was like, you got a lot of talent, but we got to sharpen this up a little better to make you a real pro. And the first team goalkeeper coach was like, if he's sharp and if he shows that he really wants it, and this is like what he wants to do for his job, and I can see that on, in person, then, he's got my backing. Because what ended up happening actually when I signed my homegrown deal was that the first team goalkeeper coach went to the sporting director and was like, let's sign this guy. So eventually, he was on my side. And in my instance, every instance is different. But in my instance, it was work ethic. Was my work ethic there? Did I really want to do this? That was the only difference.
Did you ever question your work ethic, or did that come later where you realized, you know what, it could have been stronger? Like in the moment, did you realize?
I did. At first I took offense. I was like, my work ethic. I'm like, what the fuck does this mean? And then I realized I was like, hold on. What I saw like Cody Mizell, who was the third string at the time. I was like, oh, hey, but he's getting it at 7:30, and like I'm strolling in at like 9. I was like, okay, what am I doing? Like, this guy's got 2 kids. He's got to put food on the table.
Pros. Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I'm going to beat him out. And I remember going to the second team head coach and being like, asking him what time does he show up? And he was like, oh, like around 7:45, 7:30, something like that. I was like, okay. So then after that, I just started showing up before him. And I never competed with him. Like, it was never like that. It was never like, we were really competing. But I was like, if this is what it takes to just even be the third string, like, this is what I got to do. So that was kind of the Kickstarter with all that. And like I said, the gym really got my head screwed on right. So
you really had to prove yourself to, initially what you said, not a good relation, but you had to prove yourself to a more senior coach. Hey, coach, look at me. Or you had to kind of up your game, right? Both in dedication and not just your skill set, which you already had.
Yeah, and I think to like relate it to a young player's perspective, I think, I had coaches growing up that like weren't the biggest fans of me. But if you're open and honest with them and you're like, hey, maybe don't say like, hey, like I know you don't like me, but be like, hey, I want to play for you and I want to show you that I'm good. What does that take? Most coaches, unless they were total assholes, will tell you exactly what you need. Right? That's what I did. And he told me, he was like, you need better work ethic. Like, do you want to play fucking soccer? That's literally what he asked me. And I thought to myself, do I want to play soccer? I was like, yeah, I do. And I thought about it more. Like, I do. Okay, what does this take now? Right? So like if a young player's got an academy coach coming up to them or got like a club soccer coach coming up to them, and you're not really playing, ask him why, firstly. He should tell you. And then basically make a plan around that. So if he's telling you, okay, you're not playing because you're not fit, well, then get fit. Ask him, how can you get fit? You got to kind of go above and beyond a little bit to get their eye. And you'll also notice that when you do that, like when you start going above and beyond, you feel better mentally, but 2, you also like you're gonna get fitter, you're gonna get stronger. Or if maybe the coach's critique is like watching video and everything, maybe you start learning more. You just start learning more about like what happens when the 6 drops in, and now you're building into back 3. Okay, oh wait, the fullbacks are now going high. Like you start learning about that kind of stuff. So I think it's just to be open and honest and just my thing was always like I'm gonna shut up and work. That was really it. So
no, it's excellent advice. Yeah, let's do some parent questions.
Yeah, what should a parent do when their kid is talented but confidence starts to collapse?
I would say to tap the network that's around them. So I would say as a parent, you obviously know your child better than anyone else, but you maybe don't know them at that soccer level that a coach would know them, or maybe even another parent would know them. Because I often found that like I opened up to other parents more than my own parents. Like I was too scared to open to them. So if there's a guy that I was carpooling with, like maybe I was opening up to his dad a little more. And it was good for his dad because his son wouldn't open up to him. So then there's kind of like this relationship there. And then if, you also have, have an open conversation with your kid, but don't push them. That's the one thing I would say. You really don't want to push them. And I also wouldn't say, I'd be like, hey, like, what's going on with your confidence? Like, don't say, like, don't preface it like that. Like, maybe if it's like an activity that you're doing with your son or your daughter that you typically do, maybe like on Thursdays you go to the movies or something like that. Like, slip it in there when you're having like a good conversation. Just maybe ask it a little bit there. That's what I would say. Like my mom and my dad, if they had to ask me about something, they would let me play video games, and depending on how well I was doing, like if I was happy, like then they would start asking me questions coming back from that, and then I'd be like, oh, I'd be answering the questions like
well,
that.
it's not fair.
So,
Your mom's a psychologist.
Yeah, I was gonna
this is
say,
not
yeah.
fair.
She's starting at third base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alex, just for you, is we touched about it a little bit, but you're a goalie, and especially in the academy level, you just don't start a lot of games, or there's that competition that's there. Were there ever tense moments between you and your parents in that sense, where you were kind of, head down saying you could have done better, should have done better, or you never interacted with them on that level?
I mean, there was games where I played terribly, like a game goal, or maybe I gave the ball away too many times, or like, and there's moments where I'm just dead silent in the car. And I think when that happens, kind of let the silence run its course. Obviously you want to be there to support your kid, and you want to, help them out in any way that you can, but just know that anything that you'll say in that moment might be, poking the bear a little bit. And so, when I was dead silent in the car, it would often just be dead silent in the car, or the music, there'd be some music on in the background, right? And maybe the only conversation that we'd be having is like, all right, what do you want to eat? And we talk about dinner, and that's it. Because I think you got to kind of let it cool down a little bit. You can't go, like, unless I played absolutely horribly in a professional game, I'm not going right onto my phone and watching the clips. Right. Like, like I'm gonna cool down a little bit. Like I'm gonna, I'll throw my headphones in, I'll listen to some music, maybe I'll watch some TV, I'll chill. And the next day I'll look back on the stuff. Okay, what could I have done better? So definitely don't rush into like post-game analysis or post-training analysis. And if it's recurring, and like maybe, someone's, you're on the bench, that's a very good experience. I mean, it's not good because you're not playing, but it's a different experience because one, you know how much it sucks, but two, you also start to learn how it is to be a good teammate. Like I was never benched till probably my U16 year, and then I started getting benched, and I was fucking pissed off. And then over time, and I started realizing like, one, I can beat out this guy, but I can also make it a very positive environment at the same time. Like when you realize that there will be opportunities to play, but there'll also be opportunities to like grow as a person and as a goalkeeper. When that realization hits, it's big. Like it's just a good learning experience. Now, if your child is not playing over a year's worth of games, okay, that's when maybe you can, raise the red flags, or maybe even 6 months games, 7 months games, have a conversation with the coach, or just be like, hey, like he's got to find a place to play. Because yes, game time is important, but at the same time, know that, being on the bench it'll teach your child something. So
yeah, you just touched on a couple of really, really important things, and one of them I just wanted to pull out, which is something that's come up on I think every single one of our discussions so far, which is patience, and we just don't have enough of it. As parents, as parents, I think even as kids, but I do think a lot of that starts with parents, and I've mentioned this a few times on the show. Like I certainly have been guilty of that, and I've recognized where I've been too impatient in certain situations, and it's unfortunately like it negatively impacted my kid. But but it's really hard to be patient when we all know that the window, I guess the window is actually bigger than we think it is, but in our minds, it feels much, much smaller, right? And especially living in this surround sound world that we live in, which I think has just accelerated, the impatience around us because everything seems perfect in everybody's little Instagram world. And
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. But I do agree that the window is a little bit bigger. I do agree with that. And I understand like parents will also get very stressed out, especially with like college around the corner, things coming up that are absolutely monumental and your child's path. So I think the window is bigger. I think really the only time you absolutely have to raise a red flag is if you're hitting kind of that like half a year not really playing situation.
Mm-hmm. What's one thing that you've consistently seen pro players do that can be that youth players are capable of doing as well?
I would say discipline. Not all pro players are disciplined, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say most of them are.
The best ones certainly are.
There's some that get away with it, to be honest with you. Yeah. But
just talent.
But I would say, unless you're in that like 3%, 4% that can get away with it with their talent, you got to be disciplined. And I go back to the gym again, but like it also stems with like being attentive, listening. It also stems with being a good teammate, like listening to your teammates, talking to them. But it also stems with knowing your team's perception too. That's one thing I will say is like, you don't want to, like as a player, you don't want to go up to your coach and then constantly like repeat back what your coach is saying. Look kind of like a know-it-all, like a teacher's pet. Like all your teammates are gonna be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like shut up, So it would happen at the professional level too. Like, he's just do your work.
Especially if you can't play.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Just put your hands behind your back and just listen when your coach is speaking. That's what I would say.
We're gonna wrap up, but first of all, in the few months that we've been doing this, I've just learned about the enormous amount of mistakes I've been making as a dad with La Vie, and it's fine. I'm learning, but one thing is, and most people don't know, but La Vie has your shirt hanging in his room, Alex. It's kind of, and I told you that before I sent you a picture. It's like a really touching moment. Yeah. I know when he met you at the stadium, and it was an inspiring moment for him. But I look at goalkeepers are a strange breed. We all know they are the most talented, greatest, smartest, most handsome on the field. That goes without saying. But when they make a mistake, it's a on and off. It is an absolute disaster. So, what advice do you have for a young goalkeeper that just was in a game and just made that big mistake, and everybody's looking at that kid?
Be a goldfish. Like goldfish have terrible memories. So like something will happen, and like 5 seconds later, they have no idea that happened. So that's kind of the approach you need to have. You'll be able, when the game is done, to go back and look at all that stuff. If I make a mistake, like I'll analyze the situation, and I'll know probably in the moment what I could have done better. And I'll tell myself that, but then after 10 seconds, I'm like, I'm not thinking about anything else. You got a whole rest of the game to play. You got to focus. And, as soon as the team like realizes that, okay, maybe that goalkeeper's not really in the game, next thing you know, maybe they're dropping a corner kick on your head and you're not focused, and like, they're like, they start to play those games a little bit. So yeah, just forget about it. If you want to get your confidence back up again, maybe play. If you're a goalkeeper that builds out, maybe play a couple simple passes to the center back, just get your mojo getting up again, or someone shoots a ball at you, just make the save, and that'll keep your confidence going. If you're a goalkeeper that doesn't build out of the back, maybe put the ball down and just hit it up to the 9, hit it past the 9, just get the blood flowing a little bit again. But you're right. There's a lot of pressure in goalkeeping. Probably the most pressurized position, maybe behind being a forward, or I would say more so, to be honest. You need to just kind of move on from that.
So make a mistake and forget quickly. So that is why there's not a lot of great Ashkenazi Jews goalkeepers. I get it. Okay. Well, another thing learned. Check. That goes in the summary of season 2. Alex, that was worth the whole 100 minutes.
I'm gonna have to make sure.
You're gonna keep that. You should keep that in the file.
No, I'm only doing that. That's actually the only line.
I'm gonna
because
learn.
I didn't press record. I just started to record.
I'm gonna learn how to edit now. Oh man,
Alex, bravo, brother.
Thanks, man.
We are just all behind you, man. You're an extraordinary young guy.
Yeah.
More than wow here. This is like a opa. Wow. They think I'm going to run out of these to say. The thing I keep coming back from this conversation is the word routine. Motivation, okay. Talent, okay. Obvious, but routine. Alex says it really plainly. The one thing that really helped me now as an adult to get my work ethic done is the idea of routine. He breaks it down to practical stuff, sleep, food, and even film. And he says, okay, when am I going to go to sleep? And what am I going to eat today? And when am I going to watch tape? As a parent, that's the hard part, right? We want to keep our kids locked into healthy routine for the rewards to come.
And what's important is this isn't some extreme mindset. Alex is very clear about the standard. I try to be the first one in the facility. I'm trying to be the last one out. I'll watch film before training. I'll lift before training. And then he says it straight. At the MLS level, this is the bare minimum.
Yeah, and then he adds another line about going pro, which you and I really never thought about in that sense. You got bills. That's when soccer stops being a dream and it starts becoming a job. And that's what we hope parents and players take away from this episode. After hearing all this, I just want to be clear. This is probably exactly why this podcast will never be super successful, because there's no work ethic around here.
None. Zero.
This is Chasing the Game. See you next time.